I think we can go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you for all of you for joining us today, and thank you for those joining on Zoom. Um, my name is Vicky Murakami Tsuda. I'm the digital program manager at JANM, and I have had the wonderful opportunity to be Kenny Lorca's supervisor this summer. He's our intern through the Nikkei Community Internship program that we co-host with the Japanese American Bar Association. Thank you very much to JABA, because they, as well as sort of providing the opportunities for Kenny to explore different legal areas. They also funded not only the position, but also funded Kenny and Evan being able to fly up to San Francisco to interview Dale Minami, which was very special. I'm going to let Kenny talk about that more, but I did want to very much thank JABA for their support and their partnership. Through this partnership, we had Kenny interview Dale for Discover Nikkei, as well as a couple of other different assignments, which he'll also be talking about. So without further ado, I do want to invite Alan up here to say a few words on behalf of NCI.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Alan Takashi Riley, and I am Kizuna's program strategist. And I had the pleasure of getting to work with Kenny for the last about 7-8 weeks now. I remember when I met Kenny, it was actually at a USC internship expo. I think he might have been the first person who talked to me at my table. And within like the first 15 to 30 seconds, I just got like an overwhelming feeling of just how genuine and sincere he is, and I was really looking forward to receiving his application. When I did get that and I interviewed him, it just kind of confirmed everything. And obviously for the last month or so, it's just been such a great pleasure working with him. So just want to congratulate Kenny, and I'm really glad that I get to be here to watch you close things out.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
We'll let Kenny do his presentation, and then we'll have brief Q&A afterwards. So for those of you joining on Zoom, if you want to go ahead and post any questions or comments for Kenny in the Zoom chat, we'll get to those later. And here you go.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenny Lorca, and thank you all so much for being here for my final presentation, talking about my experience with the Japanese American National Museum, the Japanese American Bar Association, through that with Alan and the Nikkei Community Internship. So before I get into talking about my internship itself, I want to give you guys a little bit of background about myself for those of you who I've not had the opportunity to speak with very much. Well, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Los Angeles. I was raised in Eagle Rock. I was born in Pasadena, though. Right now, I'm currently majoring in law, history, and culture at USC, where I will be a rising sophomore. And one of my career goals, or my main career goal, is to hopefully practice public interest law at some point in the future. And some of my hobbies also include, I used to be in my high school's jazz band, so I still love to play piano, I love to sing. I also love going to flea markets and thrifting and looking at old antiques. I'm also a very big superhero nerd, so I love that new Spider-Man movie that just came out. So what I want to talk about today first, though, is not necessarily just what I did this summer, not just a summary and list of things and projects I've worked on, but I want to talk about how this internship has changed how I see myself and the direction I hope to move forward with after all these experiences. I want to talk about first my connection to the Japanese American community. I'd always known that I really cared about Little Tokyo, and I loved coming here. I loved getting the food. I loved just hanging out here, especially when my dad took me here growing up. But I never really examined why Little Tokyo was so personal to me. And I only really found that out by connecting the pieces of my childhood through writing in my first project with JANM, in my Discover Nikkei Chronicles article under Vicky, my wonderful JANM supervisor. And I think I realized that my true personal connection to Little Tokyo really derived from my shame of being Filipino. You see, growing up, my parents really wanted me to fit into the rest of the community. They took me to places like the Natural History Museum, the California Science Center, the LA Zoo, places to help me fit in better with the rest of the kids once I got to school and while I was in school. And I think part of the reason is because my dad had grown up in Atwater in the 1980s here in LA, and he also faced some pretty bad racism, some pretty bad bullying just because he was Filipino. So I think part of it was the fact that he didn't want me and my mom didn't want me to have that same sort of experience. But, you know, that doesn't change. No matter how much they change the way I think, the way I look at the world, nothing can change the color of my skin. Oops. The color of my skin or the shape of my eyes. And that was really evident once I got to elementary and middle school. When students called me names, they'd make their slant eye gestures or call me the occasional slur. But the real disappointment, I think, to me, was the fact that the teachers didn't really do much to stick up for me or stick up for the other Asian students. And by not sticking up, they were essentially validating these racist feelings. Because I really wasn't mad at the students. None of them were really born with hatred or malice in their hearts. But because of the fact that these teachers validated it by not saying anything, allowing it to grow within them, allowing them to practice that sort of discrimination later in their life, is really the heartbreaking thing. And in one instance, I remember only really recently, because I think I had suppressed this memory over the past few years, but one time I brought a matcha cookie to Little Tokyo. You know, was one of my favorite things growing up. But one of my favorite teachers went up to me and he looked at me with this disgusted face on his disgusted look on his face, and he said, "That thing looks rotten." You know, and although I didn't get beaten up, and I was very lucky I didn't get beaten up or bullied in that way growing up, being Asian, you know, those kinds of things still stuck with me, right? Those verbal actions that people would say to me. And that still made me feel very ashamed of being Asian. It made me feel very ashamed for liking Asian things. There were times I wished I was white, because I believed that Filipinos were this insignificant people, this inferior people, in comparison to my peers who were predominantly white, who were predominantly Armenian. But Little Tokyo served as this stark contrast to the rest of my life. People there in Little Tokyo were proud of their language, proud of their culture, proud of their food. It was a place where I could enjoy all these Asian things, geek out about Godzilla action figures, or eat all the food I wanted, and I didn't have to feel ashamed of being Asian. And although I'm not Japanese, I was not involved with any of the youth programs here in Little Tokyo, it still felt like this sort of refuge, a place where I could find solace in. It felt almost like a home. So as I grew older, I realized, you know, as I learned through different college classes, high school classes, being very privileged to have traveled to different countries in the world and understand the struggles around the world and here at home in LA, I started to grow tired of feeling helpless and being frustrated at the world. And that's part of the reason why I hope to practice public interest law. But I knew that I could still make a difference right now, even at my age. You know, having a law degree isn't necessary to making an impact on other people's lives. And with how much Little Tokyo meant to me, I wanted to give back to the community in some sort of way. But before I really got into the meat and potatoes of working with NCI, JANM, and JABA, I had a lot of internal qualms with myself. I felt a lot of doubt. Number one, for the fact I'm fully Filipino and I'm not Japanese at all. Why would Alan entrust some Filipino freshman to contribute to Little Tokyo? And I remember at orientation, when I was looking at the other names of the NCI interns, I would scan if anyone else had a non-Japanese last name, because I felt like my last name of Lorca would stick out like a sore thumb. I was also not very confident in my work. While I was familiar with Little Tokyo and incarceration history to an extent, I would never truly be able to understand the Japanese American experience, just like I'll never know the African American experience. I'll never know the Latino American experience. And with that, how am I supposed to work in a museum that's dedicated to telling the stories of the Japanese American museum and the Japanese American community? But with all this, I still had to set aside my worries, set aside my qualms, and just simply focus on getting my work done and getting my work done well. And with that, I want to talk about, well, as you can see, this internship can really be broken up into 3 parts: NCI, JABA, and JANM. But I want to first talk about my experience with NCI, with Alan and the other interns. And I think at NCI, I really started to learn what the meaning of community is. See, prior, I thought of community as this very concrete and well-defined idea, in that community is simply just a group with shared history, values, and identity. I thought it was just the people I was meeting, people like Bill Watanabe, Mike Murase, Kristen Fukushima, Mitch Maki, Helen Ota. I thought it was just the places I'd be going to, whether it was JANM, going to Go for Broke, or Little Tokyo Service Center, or First Street North Residence, the new building. I thought it was things like that. That's what defines a community. But after NCI, I learned really that it's much more complex than that. That Little Tokyo is not this monolithic group, and it's not just this location. One phrase that really stuck with me was, I forgot who exactly said it, but this idea that Little Tokyo was shifting away from preservation and instead towards sustainability. And I think that really encapsulates what community has become for me. It's not just this mausoleum, it's something that is active. Community is not what it is, but it is what it continues to be. And I really experienced this by speaking and befriending the other NCI interns from NorCal and here in LA, understanding how either they were 5th or 4th generation Japanese American, whether they were Shin Nisei, whether they were part Japanese or just not Japanese at all, like me. They all had very unique perspectives in understanding what this community looks like and what it means. And also things like new conversations I was just completely unfamiliar with, whether it was talking about how we remember history, how we remember African Americans here in Bronzeville and Little Tokyo during World War II, or how Little Tokyo interacts today with Skid Row residents. And it's things like that that make me think about the stories of the past and how we continue to interact with the stories of the future. But on the other hand, with JABA, I think I really understood what it meant to sustain that community, and the ways in which law can help community can be extremely diverse as well. As you can see, there was a pretty long list of places I was very lucky and very fortunate to have been able to visit and had the time to visit. But 2 of the main experiences I want to talk about today was, number 1, my visit to Monterey Park and Compton to the juvenile dependency courts. For those of you who don't know what juvenile dependency is, it is a specialized civil court division handling cases of child abuse, neglect, and abandonment. And I knew going into it, it was going to be extremely emotionally taxing. I mean, these are the fate and lives of children and families, right? And it's extremely, very complex, overlapping with that constitutional right to parent, but as well as the well-being of the child. But nothing could have prepared me for actually sitting in the courtrooms, and people were no longer just descriptions or words on a page, but they were this mother and child I saw holding each other as they cried in court. It was where families can be rebuilt and children can be saved from abuse, a place where I could see tangible change as the government tries to repair these broken families and broken homes. But another experience that really stuck with me was visiting Somos Group with Kira, my supervisor from JABA, and I learned different practices that the firm does, like land, transactional, administrative, and environmental law. And I understood how people can harness that side of the private legal system to benefit the public. But I think what I really got from those 2 visits, whether it was juvenile dependency or Somos Group, the private law firm, I understood that community doesn't survive based off one particular type of service, or one traditional type of law that you would think of, whether it's like public defense or being a civil rights advocate. A community survives from both the invisible kinds of actions and the invisible actions from the public eye. Whether it's saving a child from domestic violence or working behind the scenes on planning, on contracts, on documents and agreements that most people will never be able to see, each of these things are so influential and essential to sustaining a community. But I think it was JANM where, while I learned that what community really looks like and what I may do in the future to sustain it, JANM is where community, to me, became really personal. This mainly became because of my major focus being the JABA Legal Legacy Project to interview and write about Mr. Dale Minami. And to prepare for this interview, I had to do extensive research about him and understand the true weight of this project. And as I researched about him, I realized this is the guy who overturned Fred Korematsu's criminal conviction, which had been upheld decades before by the Supreme Court. A Supreme Court case I vividly remember learning about in high school and in college because of how flagrant of a civil rights violation it was, and the fact that it was just glossed over in my classes in high school and college and middle school. It was just this throwaway line, this throwaway Supreme Court case that wasn't necessary or wasn't deemed necessary by the American curriculum. But as I prepared, boarding the plane to go to San Francisco to interview him, I felt that self-doubt I talked about earlier as strong as ever before. Because again, I questioned myself. Why would they choose me to fly all the way to San Francisco, this non-Japanese American guy, to understand and tell his story? So I knew I had to do my job. I had to do it well, and I wanted to take a unique approach. I know Vicky wanted me to write about his connection to his cultural identity, but at the same time, I wanted to understand, and I wanted other people to understand what made the man behind his incredible legal achievements and personal achievements, really. But I also wanted to share a little bit about my research and my interview with Mr. Minami and talk about a little bit of background of who he is. So Mr. Dale Minami was born in 1946 in the Japanese hospital, the only LA hospital in all of Los Angeles that would let doctors of Japanese ancestry practice. His first home was a garage, which he shared with 3 other families because of the fact that a Caucasian family had moved in during World War II and refused to move out after the incarceration period. And growing up, Mr. Minami did not have much Japanese culture, not much Japanese pride, mainly because of the fact that his parents and community wanted to shield him from the blatant racism and persecution they had once faced during World War II and after World War II. But as Mr. Minami grew older and saw demonstrations in the South of African Americans being pummeled by water cannons, being mauled apart by dogs simply because they wanted an equal education, same as a white American, or wanted to sit at the same lunch counter as a white American. And he saw the injustice that was going on there. And this only grew further when he attended USC. And I remember in our interview, he described it as a place just terrible to be a person of color at unless you were an athlete. But he realized his true outrage came from something else. It came from the loss of dignity and the sheer pain his family felt during World War II, his family and his community felt. And with that, he became this fierce defender of Japanese American rights, of Asian American rights and marginalized communities. And one of his greatest achievements being working with other attorneys to overturn those criminal convictions for those who defied Executive Order 9066, that being Gordon Hirabayashi, Min Yasui, and of course, Fred Korematsu, each upheld by the Supreme Court decades before in the 1940s. But with all this, with all my incredible experiences working with JABA, working with JANM and NCI, I realized why I cared about all of this in the first place. And I think it's mostly because I saw myself in these stories. I too felt really ashamed, as I spoke about earlier, about being Filipino. And today I feel somewhat ashamed for not knowing that culture now. And, I see almost a reflection of myself within Mr. Minami's life. Although, of course, I'm not this great high-achieving attorney. He also, rejected his Japanese American identity when he was growing up. And I realized I was not just documenting stories or consuming what I learned at JANM, but it was becoming a part of how I understand my own life and how I understand my own identity. And I think one of the greatest lessons I learned from Mr. Minami was the fact that Mr. Minami was not born extraordinary. He was not born with this innate knowledge of the Japanese American community. He wasn't born this ultra-talented orator or speaker or arguer in the court. But he became extraordinary because of the choices he made. And these stories are alive because we see ourselves in them. And to me, his story felt so alive because I saw myself in them. And it made me realize that maybe I can make some kind of impact that Dale Minami did, or you here at JANM do, or the people at JABA do, or the people at NCI have an impact here on Little Tokyo and the broader Los Angeles community. And what these stories mean to me, I think, is just really impactful, especially if we look at today. And I also compared my life today and the things I see today. As you can see, these are pictures I've just taken, this past year of the social unrest and civil unrest I've been seeing, the past few months. And I compare that to the setting of what it was like in the 1960s and 1970s when Mr. Minami was growing up. And I realize now more than ever, I have to let these stories inform my choices and perspectives with the political polarization, the civil unrest, and the extreme political rhetoric, and the real threat to our democracy that we are seeing today. I realize how influential and important his story and stories like it really are. And I also want to talk about a little bit what I move forward with. See, I thought that going into this internship, I would just be learning about history. I would be learning about how to give back to the community. But each story, whether it was in the courtroom, whether I was learning from community leaders in NCI, whether I was interviewing Mr. Minami, has given me more than I can ever have asked for, more than I can ever have imagined. It has not just been this incredible professional experience where I was able to build my networking skills or my writing skills, but it has been a very deeply personal growth for me. So with that, also these are my articles that I've written. That's my article for Mr. Minami and my personal Nikkei Chronicles article if anyone wants to read them. But with that, I just want to say thank you so much to Alan, to Chris, to the NCI staff. Thank you so much to Vicky, to Yoko, to Evan, of course, to accompanying me in San Francisco, the JANM staff and the JANM interns for making me feel so welcomed. Thank you to Kira and JABA. Of course, thank you to Mr. Minami for allowing me and working with me to interview. And everyone here today who has given me their time of day to listen to my presentation, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Please feel free to have refreshments and food. And thank you all so, so much for this wonderful, incredible experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Does anybody have any questions, comments for him? I have an extra microphone here. Oh.
Can everyone hear me? Yep. Sure. For those of you that don't know, I had Kenny in my Asian American Studies class, and I want to echo the sentiment that when I first met this kid, I was like, holy crap. This is the future of our community and our scholarship. Kenny, I want to say I'm very proud. This was incredible what I saw here. I am just so happy. When you told me the news that you got this position, I was so stoked. I just couldn't believe it. I have a couple questions for you. And it was really crazy is he did such a great job, and you got a C in my class. No, I'm kidding. He got an A. He got an A. With this, participation, with this community experience, you keep talking about this fault you see or the shame you might see in your own experience as a Filipino. And it reminded me a little bit of, we've talked before, I had kind of a similar feeling. And I thought back at like what got me interested in my own, story. And for me, in my generation, I worshiped Hideo Nomo. I'm not Japanese, I'm Filipino like you, Bruce Lee. But seeing this kind of, Asian American, Asian excellence really did kind of attach me to something that I think you're seeing in your story here. Now, again, these guys aren't very famous legal scholars, things like this, but has it made you more comfortable, not only as being Asian American, but specifically that part of you that is Filipino? Has it rectified some of these feelings of your past? And do you see like ways in which these different ethnic communities in LA can do more to be, working together as a unity and a whole?
I think for the first part of the question, I think absolutely being a part of Little Tokyo and being able to contribute to this community has definitely made me feel more comfortable with being Filipino. Just seeing how proud people are, like I said earlier, how proud people are of their food, their culture, their language, their history. And I really do look up to the Japanese American community and how well, although the Japanese American community is not a monolith, people have differing views, but I think as a whole, the Japanese American community does this incredible job at preserving their own history, and preserving the stories of incarceration and the oppression and persecution they had once faced. And yeah, I think it's really made me feel more comfortable with being Filipino, because I think, and I take these different lessons that I've learned, and I want to try to apply it to my own life, to the Filipino people in my life, and other people, not even just Filipinos or Japanese, just anyone who feels like they're lacking in a sense, feels some sort of shame, right, because of their identity. I hope to take these lessons and translate them into a way that makes other people feel more comfortable, because I think that self-confidence, speaking on to the second part of your question, that self-confidence, I think, is the first step in strengthening ethnic communities, because I think once a person is self-confident and comfortable in their own skin, in their own heritage, in their own culture, that they can really understand that, wow, maybe the experience of the African American person, or Latino American, or other Asian Americans, we're not all that different. We look back at history and we understand the persecution that ethnic groups have faced throughout American history, and understanding that we shouldn't, or we can't be squabbling amongst each other, looking at the different issues, like not necessarily squabbling amongst each other, but I think of people like Latasha Harlins. I think of Cyrus Carmack Belton, and I think of the tension, and I think of Stop Asian Hate during COVID, and I think of the tension, especially between the African American community and the Asian American community. But we also look back at the 1960s and 70s, and we see things like Yellow Peril stands with Black Power, right? And we see that sort of unity. And I think that really is the first step, is to strengthening the ethnic communities across LA, across America, really, is understanding our shared history of struggle, but also our shared history of previously having worked together to, create this great, wonderful community. But yeah, hope that answers it.
Any other questions, comments? I just also want to say that it has been truly a privilege of working with Kenny this summer. It's kind of amazing to me how mature that he is, considering he just finished his freshman year in college.
Okay, it's only 12:34, so I have 26 minutes to talk. What I wanted to say, Kenny, is thank you. Thank you for coming to the Japanese American National Museum and becoming what I call one of us. All right, 10 years ago, pre-pandemic, I used to wonder what was going to happen as far as people telling what I call our story. I don't worry about that anymore, because people like Kenny come, and there were other people that have come on, and so I'm not worried about that. So I want to thank you for doing this, and as a person that was incarcerated and not interned, incarcerated in 3 different camps. All right, I won't go through the whole story of what happened, but anyway, I really want to thank you for being here and learning about us, and to tell our story and the Japanese American story, which is part of the Asian American story. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murakami. I appreciate you coming here today to listen. Thank you.
Also, I want to say he's a Trojan for life.
Fight on. Yeah.
Thanks, Kenny, for your presentation. It's always near and dear in my heart to see NCI interns really thriving and being able to do this, just because I too was an intern in NCI. Some of what you shared, I think, really reflects what I see as the vision for the long range for the museum, and how you look at the experience here in Little Tokyo as a non-Japanese American, and how you feel connected to that story, how that's inspired you. And I'm just curious about what your advice would be to the museum about things that we should continue to do, or that don't exist now, that can create that experience for others, especially those that are non-Japanese American.
I think I mean, I'm only 19. I don't have that much advice for a museum. But I think the way in which I see the world, although I've not been here very long, I think it's just being able to get younger people and younger generations to try to see other perspectives and see things, I think, first through their view and then that of others. I think things like people understanding that, Little Tokyo is right next to the Federal Building. Every morning I drive by and I see all these like graffiti in front of the Federal Building, whether it's they're calling ICE pigs or they say fuck ICE or anything like that, And I think it's being able to reflect the modern day and being able to reflect, that their stories are not that different from, that of history, people in history. Because I think I think it's also just part of what the American curriculum teaches history like. It teaches it very disconnected. Like I said, they don't teach you about Japanese American incarceration much. And it is really tough to break down that American education system and rebuild how people think and how people see the world. So I don't know. It's a tough question. I don't think I have a really great answer, but I guess for me, it's seeing myself within these stories and being able to relate to how it is today. That's kind of it. Yeah.
Any other questions? No.
Hi, Kenny. I'm Lynn. I'm in the education department here at JANM, and I thank you for your presentation. I was very encouraged and inspired by it, but I was also discouraged and disappointed that your description of your high school experience, which really wasn't that long ago. And so I'm curious to know if, I guess it's two parts, like were like Asian American studies or ethnic studies an offering to you during your high school years? And what do you think about that as being kind of I think we are very encouraged by it when we see these mandates being passed at like a high school level. Do you think that would have better equipped you to respond to some of the things you experienced, or even like the microaggressions from your teacher about your matcha cookie? What are your thoughts on those sorts of programs? Or
I think you asked if I had any of the Asian American courses in high school, and then if I did, would it have helped me with dealing with these microaggressions? No, I didn't have any of that stuff at my school. I did take AP Euro, AP Human Geo, AP Push, and AP Gov. Those were like my humanities side, and all of it is really Eurocentric. There's not much of a focus on ethnic history, really. I mean, the only ethnic really like in-depth thing that we really did was understanding the history of Chinatown, and we actually went to Chinatown as a part of my AP Human Geo class, but that was only done because of my teacher. It wasn't like part of the curriculum. So yeah, no, I never really had any of that, besides like the only Asian or ethnic, really, like African or South American or anything like that, the only ethnic views I had of it was through the lens, of course, through America or through Europe. The fact that all this history really revolves around that stuff, right? I never took world history, so I couldn't speak much on that. But, and I think if I did take those classes, I think it absolutely would have helped me deal with those microaggressions and understanding, because I could understand that, Asians don't have this inferior history. Our history is just as important as it is to America because of the Asian American experience and how much we've contributed. I mean, even same for, the African American experience, Latino American experience, So yeah, I think it definitely would have helped me, and I wish I could have helped me, but I want to, my first Asian American history class was with my former professor at Pasadena City College, so I'm glad he's here. But he really opened my eyes because I understood, I think, Asian American history to an extent, of course, through the lens of like my personal life and being able to like just understand history as a hobby, but also sort of through the American curriculum. But when it was actually told from a different lens than that of my families, than that of my peers, through this such a different world, I think that's what really spurred me and continues to spur me to contributing to this community. Yeah, but yeah.
thank you.
Anybody else? Is there anybody on Zoom that has any questions or comments? Evan's looking. Oh,
No questions, but Hope says, wow, so impressive. Thank you for sharing your experience and background.
Thank
Katrina
you.
says, Kenny, kababayan, so proud of you and your work. Fight on. Peace sign, flag, peace sign. And clapping hands emojis.
Thank you, everyone on Zoom. Appreciate it.
any final questions or comments for Kenny? Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. I just also wanted to quickly introduce Yoko Nishimura. She's the Discover Nikkei project manager. And before I hand it over to Kira to close us out, I just also encourage you, if you haven't already, to read Kenny's articles. The Dale Minami profile article is amazing. If you want his Nikkei Chronicles article, actually talks, it's basically his journey of how he got to JANM and the JANM JABA internship here. And something that he didn't mention is that he also previously volunteered at Manzanar on his own during his spring break and convinced a friend instead of going to San Diego to help excavate at Manzanar. So please check out his Nikkei Chronicles article. And if you, this year's theme is Nikkei Vision. And if you are interested in sharing your own Nikkei Vision story, we have flyers in the back. And then definitely recommend you check out his article about Dale Minami. It's really an inspiring story because there's a lot written about and a lot of interviews with Dale, but this one is really more about sort of from a personal perspective and what, like, he's 79 years old and still practices law to this day because of sort of what did you say? His outrage. Yeah. That's what's fueled and driven him and continues to drive him. So definitely recommend that. We are also uploading, we have clips from that interview that are already on or that are now added to Discover Nikkei, so you can check those out as well. And Kenny will be writing one more article for us, a reflection of his internship experience, which will kind of pair nicely with his chronicles of how he got here, and then the reflection will be sort of where he is now and what he is looking forward in the future. So thank you very much, and I'll leave it with Kira, but please stay for cake.
Cake is very important, everybody. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Kira Conlin. I am a board member of the Japanese American Bar Association, JABA. Kenny, that was an incredible presentation. Congratulations. I know you still have a week and you're gonna go up north, but that was really phenomenal. I'm just so proud of you. All of you who know Kenny or have worked with Kenny understand that he's a very special young man and has an incredible future. JABA, for those of you who are not familiar with this partnership, JABA and JANM for 10 years or more have partnered through the NCI internship on co-sponsoring an individual each summer. And so for 8 weeks, we collaborate in the various programming that you saw. And on the JABA side, we have this program that highlights legal pioneers. Today you heard about Dale Minami. I think that this repository of oral histories on the Discover Nikkei website is truly a treasure and one of a kind, and certainly the go-to of these personal narratives, oral histories of Japanese American legal pioneers here in America. So I'll just say that Kenny, you have made history with your contribution, and just really want to give kudos to Discover Nikkei in particular in the personal stories that they've accumulated over time, and we're just really pleased to be a sponsor of that work. The other thing that you saw was that Kenny does office visits, and he gets to meet practicing attorneys from across the county in various different practice areas. And we try to tailor that to the students' interests. And Kenny being interested in public interest, we were able to put together a phenomenal slate of meetings during his 8 weeks. And so I just wanted to personally thank all of those attorneys and judges who are members of JABA who showed up for Kenny and gave him some insights into what it's like practicing as an attorney, an Asian American attorney here in LA. And then just lastly, our one-on-ones and getting to meet you and tell you a little bit about how I got here as a younger attorney here in Los Angeles has been a complete honor, and I will continue to be here for you. I am your Filipino sister. I'm actually half Filipino, half Japanese, and so Kenny and I got to talking a lot about, my personal identity, being Japanese American, being Filipino American. How does that inform the work that I get to do day to day as a practicing attorney here in Los Angeles? So if you don't know Kenny, he's got a lot of questions. And so I encourage you, have some cake, meet Kenny. He will have a lot of questions for you, get to know him, and I'm sure you'll be seeing him in the future. He's going to be doing big things. So again, thank you to JANM for this partnership. Thank you to the board of directors of JABA. I see Mike Suzuki here in the audience. Thank you for being here. And those on Zoom, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, and please join us for refreshments and cake.